So we have a quorum. So I'd like to call the meeting to order, and if we can have a roll call, please.
Sure. Councilmember Davis. Councilmember Kamis.
Here.
Councilmember Dieppe.
Here.
Mayor Licado.
He's here.
He's here.
And Chair Chapter Jones.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right. And does anybody want to make any changes to the agenda, modifications? None. So there's nothing on the consent calendar. Now we go to reports to the committee, but before we do that, I'm supposed to acknowledge that today is the last day that we're going to do a Facebook Live, my understanding, and that also that our ratings have gone down since the initial broadcast, so my opportunity to be an internet star is faded away. Dashed. We'll have to figure out how to get the ratings back up. Anyway, so I just want to make that announcement. So
it can't be because of how good looking we all are. It just can't be that.
no, I don't think that's the case. Anyway, so first item is the Smart City Roadmap. So Kip, you want to start us out?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Mr. Mayor, and members of the general public. Kip Harkness, Deputy City Manager. The first item we're going to walk through is the Smart City Roadmap, and this is a work in progress, and so we'll be bringing different stages back to you for your feedback and guidance along the way. So this is sort of at the prototype on paper stage and the guiding principles. So as a reminder, our focus on what we work on and what we choose to work on our roadmap is an answer to three questions. Is it important to people, causing them a lot of pain and annoyance? Is it core to what our city can and should do? And is it actually achievable at scale using process improvement, technology, or both? And so all of the items that we'll be discussing in our roadmap are ones that we want to see as close to the middle of that Venn diagram as possible, in that sweet spot where we can make a difference on problems that matter. Similarly, how we do our work is equally as important. We believe these three innovation principles of championing the customer, learning through data, and iterating to improve are part of everything that we do, including the actual development of the roadmap itself, which is very much an iterative process. The good news is it's an iterative process that has yielded results. So we've just had our second birthday as an office and as a group. Our roadmap itself is even less than that. So, in tech, they talk about crawling, walking, running in terms of technology capabilities. So we're 2-year-old now, and we've certainly crawled, walked, and we're running. We may occasionally hit some walls, but we are definitely off and running. Some of the key highlights that I want to mention in terms of successes out the door is the digital inclusion and broadband strategy, the broadband agreements in large, the My San Jose 1.0, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, and the talent recruitment initiative work that has transformed our hiring from a crisis into actually an opportunity for a lot of departments, so there's still a lot more to be done there. We've also had some smaller scale, but equally as important successes. We've launched some advisory boards that are helping us think through things. We have really interesting partnerships with folks like Airbnb, emerging IoT strategies, and real world work that's been done with fire and police on key work. So all in all, a very good second birthday for the work that you all set us out to do. What we've also realized is that innovation is very much a team sport, and we sort of started this just by kind of noting one or two, and then as we kept going, we realized we really have quite the fan wall of people who've chosen to come and work with us and participate with us. And so you see some of the very biggest names in global players in innovation and technology, including great hometown players like Cisco and others, and then connectivity partners that we have mentioned, AT&T, Verizon, Mobility, Facebook, and then a whole host of nonprofits, foundations, community-led efforts from the Knight Foundation to Code for America to Code for San Jose that have really helped us translate your vision closer and closer into reality. So the challenge that you gave us was really to broaden and deepen our work around innovation. Our original innovation roadmap kind of scaled mostly around innovation and impact. We had about 22 odd projects, some a little bit of light scale experimentation, and then we had our IT roadmap, which was really focused on brilliant at the basics, and there was sometimes a bit of confusion amongst the two and what should fit where. And I think the challenge that you laid out for us going into this year is to broaden and deepen that. Certainly to include the brilliant at the basics, but not to let that get in the way of real innovation at scale, and to make more space and more agility and more focus on the ability to learn quickly from things like the Facebook Live pilot and to take advantage of the genius of the valley that we live in. So that's our goal as we evolve the Smart City Roadmap, realizing that that middle portion, innovation at scale, as impact, is really about bringing things to execution at scale, and we have a significant number of opportunities to do that based on the work that we've been successful at over the last year in particular. I'm going to go back in time and a couple of years and walk through, it's a little bit of an eye chart, but I want to use one single example and deep dive into it as how we are going to be approaching all of the other strategies and what we have learned about what works and what doesn't in our particular San Jose model, San Jose way. So I'm going to use broadband as the example. Before we even came out as an innovation organization, the mayor and the mayor's office was working on this with council members. There was a vision, a Smart Cities vision that was adopted. There were relationships that were built with the Fuse Foundation, for example. And one of the things that came out of this was, in addition to the overall Smart City strategy, was a direction to develop a broadband and digital inclusion strategy, and you provided budget. I just want to stop and repeat that, and you provided budget, because that was extremely important to our ability to actually do something with what was a great idea. In addition to the budget, the relationship that the mayor's office brokered with Fuse Foundation allowed us, as we were starting the organization, to bring on board our first of many Fuse fellows. That's Dolan Beckel, who you see now as the director of Smart Cities with us, and you can kind of see where that pipeline goes. And so the combination of the right person, resources, and a clear strategy, we got working. Part of what happened is Dolan came in very passionate about digital inclusion, about the 95,000 people who are excluded. And I remember a couple of conversations where I was seeking to understand, and he basically said, and I said, well, how are we going to get to that? He said, well, you need to do that on the basis of the broadband strategy. And I said, what's our broadband strategy? He said, you don't have one. And so part of what we realized is that we needed to have a broadband strategy before we had a fully fleshed digital inclusion strategy. And so we did a pivot in that first year and said, let's develop a broadband strategy. Then we spent much of that year making sure that we were able to develop a broadband strategy and were not overruled at the state level, and were partially responsible or contributed to the gubernatorial veto of SB 649, which allowed us to have a broadband strategy. With that, you all approved the strategy. We immediately went to an initial agreement with AT&T, which included the Digital Inclusion Fund, first ever in the nation. And then we're at the point now with the large-scale agreements for AT&T and Verizon, which we are preparing final copies as we speak for signatures in the next couple of days, knocking on wood. And then you see, in yellow, you see what's ahead of us. We actually have to deploy 4,000 small cells. We have to put 1,000 miles of fiber in the ground without annoying every single one of your residents. We have to improve our small cell process and technology in order to move those through. And we get to launch 2 large-scaled smart city zones as a result of the partnership, as well as launching the digital inclusion strategy. So the good news is we've been very successful at moving from idea to value. And now that we're in value at scale, that's going to require a lot more people than are here at this table to implement. We really think this notion of moving conception with a significant strategic role for the mayor's office and the mayor's team, into strategy clarification with a very big role for the council and this body, and then to execution with a lot of responsibility and expectation on the city manager side, is exactly the model we want to use with the other strategies that we're approaching. So if you kind of apply that to everything, what you get is something that looks like this. As we go into year 3, we're really multiplying the effort and moving toward focused execution at scale. We also realize that we're in the middle of a capabilities transformation, looking at people, process, and technology across the organization, as well as some centralized investments that individual departments can't or shouldn't make for themselves, primarily privacy, security, data architecture and infrastructure, and platform. And that really is a multi-year process that we're going to be iteratively learning into, but that we've essentially got our work cut out for us and have a lot of the large-scale work lined up, and the key strategies that we'll be needing to move will also add to that work. So, for example, Safe City strategy is not yet developed. We expect the Safe City strategy to go through a similar process we went with the broadband strategy, which in the end will come to your approval for the direction and actually will result in more work on the ground on the implementation side once it's approved. So I see at least 6 design challenges for the Smart City Roadmap as we evolve it, and I think these are the design challenges that we're going to work through in tight collaboration with the Mayor's Office team and others. But the 6 questions I would put to us are: how do we deliver priority projects at scale, from broadband to MySalesA 2.0? I view the budget document as a very clear prioritization document. If you put money against it, you have an expectation that it's delivered. How do we continue to be brilliant at the basics in IT to provide a strong technology foundation? How do we develop new policies, from privacy to trenching, to support deployment of all of the above? And how do we nurture and create the next set of strategies, from safe cities to digital inclusion, in particular safe cities and digital inclusion? The larger question, we think, is also: how do you put the city at the center of Smart City? And I mean that in 2 ways. One, how do we make sure that this is actually a people-focused, not a technology-focused roadmap? And 2, how do we make sure it's not some innovation team off to the side of 6 people, but it's an organization of 6,200 that are committing to and delivering on the work? And to that end, we're going to be working more with the other deputy city managers, our city service area structure, and the department heads to make sure that the work that's in the Smart City Roadmap is also mapped one-to-one to the actual department work plans and all of the work that they're doing, so that it's not an also ran under other duties as a side. And last but certainly not least is: how do we tap into the genius of our community in Silicon Valley and create space for experimentation and research? That'll mean a higher level of agility, a greater deal of flexibility, a different way of thinking about things like procurement, and how we work with external partners. And that's, I think, one of the biggest areas where we had a legitimate critique against our Innovation 1.0 roadmap, is that there wasn't enough space to take into account that kind of high-speed, light-lift experimentation that can generate these kind of small wonders that we might want to see in addition to the big deals. So at the risk of getting into the details, I wanted to demonstrate that we are starting to follow our own advice, iterate to improve. Here's a prototype on paper, where we've taken some of the categories that we've been working with the Mayor's Office. We've taken, if I've got my key right, the lime green Post-its underneath the big orange priorities are projects that are funded and in progress. The orange Post-its are projects that are initiated and in progress and either partially funded or have some potential funding strategy, but they've been initiated already. The fuchsia posts are the ones that are unfunded, but we are actively exploring. And then the sky blue Post-its are projects that were identified as unfunded and are in backlog, but are certainly very interesting, and we need to understand where they fall in the prioritization. So again, without zooming in enough that you can read any of the details here, because I think that would be dangerous to all of us, this gives you a sense of, just the scale of the innovation that we are expecting of the organization. If this were to be adopted as where we were to go, for example, and it's nowhere close to that, this would be growing from about 23-ish priorities to about 100 priorities. So about a 400% increase in the number of projects, programs, and initiatives that we're tracking. If that's going to be anything other than just overwhelming, we need to make sure that that we put the city back in the smart city, that those are integrated in the work plans, the department heads understand this as a priority and are able to resource and make the work happen appropriately. And we need to make sure that these are actually the right things to do, that these are the priorities, and that we've got above the cutoff line the right things and below the cutoff line the things that can wait. So again, prototype on paper, not meant to be anything more than just a glimpse at where we are. And I think I'll actually click back to this slide of these design challenges, stop there, and open up to any and all feedback or questions that you might have about our approach. One last thing is we will be back in the next meeting in October with the next iteration of this work based on any guidance that we receive today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kip. Questions? Councilmember Camus?
So you discussed about how, how to make what a priority. I'm questioning that myself. What do you bring up to the top of make the cream of the crop, right? And I've, for example, and you've been so gracious and hosting several of these meetings with me and potential companies that want to do prototyping and other projects like free charging stations, and thank you for meeting with them. And I know you had that grid at one point where you had the easy to achieve, quick to achieve, and not expensive. And you, is that still the way you're working on? Like low-hanging fruit, cheap low-hanging fruit, then more expensive low-hanging fruit. Is that the way it's going?
Better quality fruit.
So I just, how do you strategize, or are you going to bring back your strategy back here?
We'll bring more of it back. Again, we believe it's this, part of what's clarified for me recently, and I'm going to just sort of share where my thinking is, not where my direction is at this point, is I think it's actually helpful to at least from a thought perspective, bifurcate it into two streams or pipelines of work. There's one stream that are about these kind of big rock projects that are just core to what we are doing as a city. I'll use my favorite one, and I've got my two phones because I get to test out both Verizon and AT&T. When Jay's work is delivered on this, and we have the 4,000 cells up, this will be 10 to 50 times faster service for every subscriber in San Jose. We know that has to happen. We know that's a priority. That's clear. If the only criteria is these big rocks, the danger is you cloud out a lot of small and interesting stuff that you can either learn from, create professional development opportunities from, or will inform next round of strategy or next round of strategy development. Part of what we've realized is that we need to separate those because those are two ways of thinking and two ways of acting. So if you have somebody who's on this heavy lift project, and then you say, okay, you're doing this, but for now you need to be light and nimble, that context switching is like switching between two languages that you're both trying to learn at the same time. And so what we want to do is we want to do less context switching with the teams, and we want to create a separate pipeline for these small wonders. Right? So some of the work that we've been engaged in where we're like, hey, we might be able to put these chargers out in front of a retail outlet and see how they're used. That doesn't take a whole lot of energy. We can do it once. We can measure the data. We can learn from it. We can time box it. And then we can say, okay, how does this inform our larger electric vehicle strategy? How do we want to coordinate with PG&E? What's this bigger, longer term big rock that we focus on execution? And so what we're trying to do is do a yes and be able to say there is space for both. Part of what we realized is we actually need a slightly separate team and a slightly separate process for each of those, because otherwise we're doing context switching that causes each side to suffer rather than brings value to both of those directions. I don't know if that directly answered your question, but I think percentage-wise, 85 to 90% of what we're going to be doing is those big rocks. And then 10% or so is going to be this smaller scale experimentation that allows us to learn and think into new ways of doing business.
Yes, and I kind of understand what you're saying. I'm looking for a little more specifics, hopefully in the future.
Yes, sir. We'll bring those back with details of the actual project names and vet those with you and say, is this the right stuff? Are there things that need to be moved out or in? And get your opportunity to provide feedback on that.
Yeah, and just so you know why I asked that question, on Tuesday of next week, we're actually voting on implementing LED strategy here to spend $441,000 on new LED lights by bonding out, basically not bonding, but having PG&E pay for. We pay PG&E, I guess, the same amount of money, and then the savings will have that. And I don't know if I should save these questions till Tuesday, but that seems to have snuck its way on ahead of what I thought you were working on was an LED strategy. And quite frankly, I'm a little confused of why this one moved forward and not the total strategy that we were discussing for the 44,000 lights that still remain unchanged.
Yeah, and I think probably more detail on that on Tuesday is appropriate, but just top line really quick as it relates to the roadmap, part of what we don't want to do with an innovation roadmap is stop things going forward that make sense in the moment. So the top line, the analysis was an ESCO, which is this way of using the energy savings to finance the lighting, had some limitations and opportunities, and we're taking advantage of that opportunity. We've done that in coordination with the larger strategy, so our sense is it's not colliding with the strategy, and the rework that would be necessary with the controllers is rework we'd have to do anyway. So might as well take advantage of this financing mechanism, which allows us to do this work now, and it's not, from our perspective, in conflict with where we see the larger strategy going. To your point, it would probably be helpful to make that more transparent than it has been, especially when we have a strategy that's sort of being baked in the background that's not transparent yet. But that's exactly the kind of thing we want to make sure we're doing when we say put the city back in the smart city. I don't want to have city decisions made over here and smart city decisions made over here. They need to be aligned.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why when this came up, there's 1,200 new lights, and specifically just for downtown. I also thought that they might run a conflict with the strategy for the cell towers as well. And I don't know if you all talked to each other before this went forward.
Absolutely. We're coordinated on both the aspects of how does this affect the overall lighting strategy, the IoT strategy, as well as the cell towers. Not to say we've got every detail worked out perfectly, but we actually are coordinated on those three aspects on this particular project.
Okay. I'll save the rest of those questions till Tuesday.
And now we'll be slightly better prepared. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Thank you, Councilmember Jones. First, great presentation. Thank you, Kip, for that, and welcome back, Dolan. I had a question or two. First, about the example you used. If we could go back to that pretty cool but busy chart. There it is. I don't think it had ever dawned on me with all these deployment of cells that there's going to be 1,000 miles of fiber laid. I'm sure it's dawned on you, but do we have any opportunity to get a dig once policy in place or some kind of requirement in place so that we could maybe put some public fiber down where they're putting theirs?
Yeah, as you know, we're still working on those agreements. We made sure there's nothing in the agreements that precludes us from doing that.
Great.
Once we get the agreement signed, then we're in parallel working with the departments and external stakeholders on what a dig once policy would look like. I think we have the opportunity to help shape what the policy looks like by working with the telcos as they're doing the trenching for these 1,000 miles and make sure that they're synergistic. So short answer is yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And Dolan, that work is actually already underway in terms of the internal coordination and reaching out to stakeholders on the potential policy and what that might look like, right?
Correct. We're actively shaping a recommendation to bring to council on a dig once policy, and that's actively taking place now.
And sorry if I'm getting too far ahead of ourselves here, but do we have any sense of what it would cost if we were to decide that for some significant portion of those 1,000 miles we want to go lay publicly owned fiber?
So if we did it ourselves, it's about $250,000 a mile. If we have a joint trenching agreement where we're cost sharing, that significantly brings it down. So don't have the numbers to exactly do the math in my head, but I believe it goes from like $250,000 a mile to less than $50,000 a mile if the trench is already open, and then we're just simply laying in our own additional conduit and fiber. And then we have the opportunity to potentially lease it back to further offset those costs.
Okay, but wouldn't that be nice? And do we have, I'm sorry if I'm getting too far upstream here, but okay, but right now the agreements don't preclude it, and we have reason to believe it's something we can work in.
Correct, they don't preclude it, and we've even talked about joint trenching or joint coordination. And obviously what comes up is if we're not going to be in competition
Yeah.
And that's the only sticking point, and really based on our strategy of not being an ISP and focusing on digital inclusion to underserved areas, which oftentimes don't get served, we're not in competition in that situation, we're complementary. So the verbal discussions have been very positive about doing things together during this 1,000 miles of fiber that has to be laid.
Okay, thank you for that. I look forward to continuing the conversation offline, and good luck with wrapping up those agreements. As we think about Brilliant at the basics, is procurement reform going to find its way into that list?
Yes, it needs to. I think the point of departure for us on procurement is really functional and probably technology. Part of what we realize is there's a lot of anecdotal pain points about procurement, and part of what we need to do is hone down on where we think the actual pain points are that apply to the roadmap. So our first bite at the apple around procurement will be around procurement as it relates to technology and procurement as it relates to some of these light lift innovations. For example, we are currently entering into a collaboration now with STIR, a startup in residence. And they've been working with our procurement team tightly. The way that we source the startup in residence is it's essentially a procurement process. So if at the end of the 16 weeks with STIR, we actually have something that we want to scale, we don't have to go, okay, we like you, but now we're going to throw you back to the wolves and you have to go out and compete with everybody else. We've already competed them, it qualifies. So what we're looking at over the course of this next year is not full-scale procurement reform, unless we get direction and support on that, but really more focused around procurement as it relates to technologies and the Smart City Roadmap, and figuring out where we can do different procurement methods. Another quick example where we're already looking at that is within the integrated permitting system and doing more agile procurement methodologies, for example. So we want to make that a body of work. At this point, it's not fully resourced, but we realize that should be part of Brilliant at the basics over the next 12 to 18 months.
Cool, thanks, Kip. And then I just want to express my appreciation that you're creating sort of this separate stream to consider the small wonders projects. It is hard if you're carrying heavy boulders to juggle balls. And so we know that both can be important, so I really appreciate your willingness to make room for that.
You always have one more.
No.
You always say, oh, I got one more. Just one quick question. Kip, that you were talking about working with and collaborating with the different departments to get our initiatives into their work plan. Can you go into a little bit more detail on what that process looks like and how we can make that happen and what your strategy is?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. It's a bit bureaucratic, but part of what we learned back in Strong Neighborhoods was that it was very important that projects that were identified as priorities and resourced were also understood to be core to the departments themselves. And so it's a matter of ownership, not buy-in. And so part of what we're looking at right now is we have a structure within the city which are called city service areas. And basically that's the way we internally divvy up our work along cross-departmental pieces. And so conceptually what you might imagine is, and again, prototype on paper, so this is not finalized. You might imagine that there might be a group or portfolio of these projects that relate to a particular city service area, let's say community and economic development. And so part of what we would do is take that portfolio and body to that existing organization, which is a city service area, and say, hey, these are the funded prioritized projects. Here are the unfunded ones that are in flight. Let's have let's decide on what the priorities are and what we can either do and commit to, or we need more resources on, with an eye toward fulfilling the goals and the expectations that the council has set out. And then out of that, the idea would be, hopefully for the most part, it would come back and say, yes, 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 we're committed. And on the areas where we've got barriers or resources, we can begin to surface those problems before mid-year, before the annual budget, to make sure that we're able to add what we need to make progress, or reorient the department and say, no, you need to stop doing this in order to start doing that. Part of what we haven't had is the opportunity for those debates internally in a way that the department heads, who are really the drivers of the organization service delivery, are allowed to debate and then own those results. And we found that the innovation cabinet that we'd formed, while useful for a lot of conversations, was sort of orthogonal to the organization. It's a little off to the side and to the corner. And so we want to make use of the existing delivery mechanisms and bring the portfolio in and then debate that right up front with the department heads as they're making their prioritizations. So if there is a disagreement or difference of opinion, we can surface that, and if it needs to go beyond the city manager's level and come back to you, we can bring back to you and say, look, we really don't think we can deliver on this, and this is why, or this is what we're struggling with. So again, we kind of want to pour these back into the city service areas and have the departments then align them with their existing work plans, and if they need to reprioritize, to have that internal debate before we come back to you.
Great answer. And orthogonal?
Ornithagonal.
Ornithagonal.
It's when things just the corners are touching, right?
Okay. Because I'm trying to keep a list of all the new words that you teach me, though.
Yeah, what was that other one? The P first? FOMO? When you want to earn the first?
Oh, yeah. Fear of missing out.
Yes, FOMO. I like.
Thank you, Kip. We have, well, first of all, any other questions? No. We have a speaker, Blair Beekman. And Blair, if you can do us a favor and sit closer to the front, so, no.
Hi, welcome back from after Labor Day. I wish the mayor was here. Hopefully you can pass on my words to him, however I can speak them at this time. About the, you mentioned one of your first graphics was it offered police dashboard and IoT strategy ideas. I didn't see listed on there the idea of the accountability process. You know, that is a whole arm and a whole field that I think can do something amazing. I think you probably are all aware now that County of Santa Clara has finished a few of their first stages of their technology ordinance. And it sets out a set of guidelines and expectations about what to expect of technology, how it will be used, how the public can ask how it's being used, how they can see the data about it, how government themselves, how you can look into and understand the data practices. And it's just such an incredible function and part of this whole, system that we're creating that I feel you talked about how to introduce more ways to develop smart tech at this time. I just think that's it. I know you guys are working on it internally within City of San Jose, and I just think it knocks the socks off. I mean, I know that it's an expression, but it does amazing wonders, amazing things, and I just think it needs to be talked about more and included often. And what I mentioned yesterday, I think we're very far ahead of places like Seattle in terms of like that. So keep up this work. IoT strategy. I'm really disappointed in the Big Belly downtown. I feel it's an IoT process that totally intimidates the heck out of everybody. Now that's the introduction of IoT we have.
Thank you, Blair.
So good luck in your work. Thank you.
All right, moving to item D2, the Digital Inclusion Program Fund Update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the council, members of the general public. Kip Harkness again. For this, Jacob, our broadband manager, is going to walk us through where we are with digital inclusion. I think the framing comment for this is no city is really a smart city if the people are excluded from participating. And we think that connectivity is an infrastructure of the 21st century. And so we are devoting quite a high amount of effort to understanding what kinds of investments the city can and should make to allow more of our 95,000 residents who are excluded to become more included in this. And I think it is useful to remember that work is generously funded by a Facebook grant of a significant amount, and that future funding stream for this is based on the telecommunications agreement at scale being fully implemented. With that, I'll turn it over to Jay to introduce himself and walk you through a top line of where we are in our latest iteration of our digital inclusion work.
Thank you, Kip. Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, Mr. Chair, committee members, and members of the public. Again, my name is Jay Guevara. I'm the broadband manager for the city of San Jose. I joined the city in May after 9 years with the city of Santa Cruz as their broadband manager and economic development manager, specializing in fiber optics, small cells, other broadband technologies, and especially approaches that include delivery through public-private partnerships. I am ecstatic to be your broadband manager, to be responsible for the relationships with these telecommunications carriers, to be a part of an amazing team that is scaling the deployment, and to further contribute to the people, processes, and technology that enables this connectivity layer that forms a basis for the Smart City Roadmap, and as we will discuss in a few minutes, digital inclusion. I'll be providing an update on digital inclusion. I will define what digital inclusion is, review our timeline, then review and update the committee on the digital inclusion design and research that we've conducted so far this summer, review that approach, and address our resources and how we can leverage those resources to impact digital inclusion. So, thank you, wrong button. What is digital inclusion? Simply stated, digital inclusion means people can access, afford, and adopt the benefits of a connected life. So we live in a world where if that infrastructure is not near your home, either through wireline or wirelessly, you can't connect. Even if you can connect, if you do not have the ability to afford the devices or the service, even through subsidized programs, you can't connect. We live in a world then as if you have that infrastructure, the devices, and a service, but if you don't have the digital literacy skills, you cannot enjoy the benefits where 70% of job applications are online, where our digital lives require that connectivity so we can participate more fully in our communities. And where, as Kip earlier said, 95,000 residents in San Jose are not connected to this digital life. One of these times I'm going to learn. So, our digital inclusion timeline, as was pointed out in the previous item, approved in November 2017, the Broadband and Digital Inclusion Strategy. We then, at the same time with the AT&T agreement in May, the Digital Inclusion Fund was created. Now, ending the summer, we're post-Labor Day. The Digital Inclusion Design Research has been conducted, and we are refining that. And we plan on returning to this committee and City Council in the winter with digital inclusion recommendations. So now I'd like to transition and review our approach and the research thus far with our design. Thank you, Kip. All right, so digital inclusion design and research. One more, please. Okay. So as Kip mentioned, thank you to Facebook for their $1 million donation. That enabled us to release an RFP earlier this summer. There were 3 out of 4 qualified respondents, and we were able to select Dahlberg Advisors as a consultant who just recently conducted interviews, research, and benchmarking. The digital inclusion team that made this possible, and I have to give a shout out and thank you to the Mayor's Office, the San Jose Public Library, and the City Manager's Office for enabling the funding flow, the RFP, and moving through that process with the consultant to perform this research and design studies.
I don't think City Manager's Office ever gets shout outs, so just keep it to the Mayor and Library. Sorry.
Thanks. All right. Next slide, please. So this slide and the subsequent slide display all the different stakeholders that we interviewed in conducting our research for benchmarking and best practices. You can see Broadband USA, which is a component of the Department of Commerce, Office of Immigrant Affairs, other community-based organizations. Then we move down into potential funders, other cities, the Work to Future program, Seattle, and Kip, can you advance, please? Boston, New York, Kansas City, Digital Charlotte, etc., Digital Nest out of Watsonville and Salinas, with more work programs, Microsoft, AARP, etc. So that's the breadth of stakeholders that we've interviewed extensively to obtain best practices and really define what is going to be the best approach for our unique community. So that best approach can be mapped across 4 different quadrants. These are the best practices that we've found in different quantities and varieties throughout these programs. Number 1, convening and building capacity in our ecosystem. The city is uniquely resourced and located in order to convene and create the strategy so that all these different stakeholders can work together to affect change and reduce the number of 95,000 residents that are excluded from the fold in a digital life. Number 2, direct services. We already have some amazing and successful programs within the San Jose Public Library System and Parks and Recs and Neighborhood Services. There is the potential to expand these existing programs, leverage that structure, and also partner with community partners where a different form of trust exists to further, especially on the digital literacy side. Number 3, Innovation Lab. An innovation lab would allow us to pilot new models of technologies for breakthroughs, be nimble and agile, much in the spirit of the innovation team, so that we can find new ways of engaging and moving that needle for digital inclusion. And finally, 4, measure, evaluate, and learn. We need to make sure that we have clear metrics, that we iterate and improve upon those metrics as we measure our success and growth for a digital inclusion program that really sets the standards. I'd like to remind this committee that we've been talking about $2 million a year, and I want to put some asterisk provisos. That assumes that we are at full deployment scale with over 4,000 small cells on the streetlights. We are collecting successfully revenues, and this revenue stream for the Digital Inclusion Program Fund needs to successfully address those 3 magical A's of access, affordability, and adoption, while also sustaining the broadband team during the deployment phase. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you, Kip. So really our discussions now as we are wrapping up, we have not completed the research and design phase, but as we're wrapping up, we are yet again using another Venn diagram, but we are looking at the demand and need. We know the demand and need across a lot of different demographics, the neighborhoods, age groups, language groups, spoken in the home. Balancing that with our capabilities and expertise in the city, the capabilities and expertise with organizations, community-based organizations in the ecosystem, and the potential capabilities and expertise of other partners that we could bring into this ecosystem. Finally, having the high degree of confidence with designing this program with metrics that set us up for success for making impact to reduce those 95,000 people without meaningful digital life benefits. So in that process, I have a couple of high-level gap analyses I'd like to share. Number 1, there is a gap right now in our programs where the community and staff is not fully valuing digital inclusion, and we have the opportunity to further build trust. We also have the opportunity to share the overarching strategy and coordinate that throughout. So designs should find ways to leverage the city's role to convene and create that coordination so that we can maximize the strengths of different organizations and reach shared goals. We can expand digital inclusion expertise, so it's not just a group of subject matter experts. Moreover, measuring impact with robust data. We can iterate to improve and learn from the data. We can expand our fundraising opportunities. While $2 million at full scale can sound like a lot, there are also the realities that to do something at a further scale with digital inclusion will require fundraising and partnering with other organizations. So we need to be mindful of how we design digital inclusion to be attractive and competitive in the fundraising environment for development. We can leverage the city programs and resources, as I've already mentioned. And finally, we need to consider how we can invest to experiment and innovate, as that is our brand, and we have an amazing opportunity to do so and impact people's lives. So with that, I'd like to conclude. We've gone over and defined what digital inclusion is. We reviewed the timeline. I've been able to review the approach and our strategy, identify the gap analysis in the budget, and there I'd like to close and receive feedback. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Jay. Any questions? Seriously? Okay. Well, actually, I have a couple of questions. One is, and if you can just really put this in layman's terms, what success looks like. If we accomplish our vision and goal and strategy, at the end of the day, in layman's terms, what does success look like?
Top level, in layman's terms, we are greatly reducing that number from 95,000 by, X number. That means that those people get the affordability, the access, and the adoption so that they can enjoy the benefits of a digital life. So the scale of that, I think we need to determine, and the program portfolio of how we strategically address that impact across existing programs, across different communities. Is this simply a number of devices released and people don't necessarily utilize those devices? Is this finding ways to partner with existing subsidized programs for the affordability side? But ultimately, high level, it's reducing that 95,000 to a far lower number.
Okay, I'm going to give Dolan a second whack at this piñata.
Right. And let me give you a little context. One of the reasons why I asked that question is, at a high level, yes, reducing that 95,000 number is a high level goal. But to me, it's more so outcomes. Are we improving, educational attainments? Are we improving job opportunities and getting more people employed? Are we reducing crime? Really, I want to know what the outcomes are going to be in terms of our objectives and what success looks like.
Right. So Councilmember Jones, Chairman Jones, you basically hit what my response was going to be. It's kind of a crawl, walk, run analogy again. And Jay's right. The first part of the crawling is just getting that access so people can take advantage of the opportunity. It's the digital literacy so they understand how they can take advantage. Then we move to the next level, which are the outcomes. So educational outcomes, healthcare outcomes, financial outcomes, workforce outcomes. And that's why the metrics gathering is so important, is that we know that access to the internet increases the likelihood that you're going to graduate from high school an additional 4%. We know that access to the internet reduces the number of physical visits to the doctor by 35%. So part of what will be done in this consulting phase is develop that work plan for defining the starting point of those metrics, and then the actions and programs we're going to implement to achieve better and better outcomes. So what you ask is what we have to do, and that's part of the work plan that the Dahlberg and Associates are going to come back to us with, which is also a 3 to 5 year plan of beginning the baseline measurement and then implementing programs to achieve those outcomes.
Great. Thank you. That definitely addresses my question. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Davis?
Thank you. What do we mean when we say broadband? The reason I'm asking is because my daughter now does her homework solely on her phone. In 8th grade, she won't even open the laptop. So are we counting smartphone access as broadband access? And of those 95,000, if we're not, does that just mean they don't, like some people don't have a landline anymore? We were just talking about this earlier. They have internet access, they're connected. It's just through their phone. It's not, they're just not turning on a computer.
Before Jay answers, I have to say this is a learning experience where I actually have to turn this over to him. So for the past 2 years, I thought that question was coming to me. Now I'm going to hit off.
Thank you, Dolan. You're absolutely correct that we are at a watershed moment in how broadband is being redefined by the technology shift. So 5G and all the promises of speed increase, capacity, and latency benefits, we're seeing a convergence to where it is a flexible technology, especially for households that cannot necessarily afford more than one device. They are going to select a phone in order to connect because it's the most flexible. It doesn't matter where you are. It can be in your home or elsewhere. The downside of that is even if it is connected to the internet, writing a term paper on a phone is not ideal. So there's still some device gaps on how we can address that. But most definitely, if you're connected to the internet, regardless of device, regardless of whether or not that is a wireless or wireline connection, and the speed, affordability, and your digital literacy, that is broadband. And 5G in particular is leaps and bounds faster. And in fact, industry recently had a study that 5G could potentially significantly disrupt what we know as traditional cable because you are economically removing the costs of the drop, the physical drop of the line from an aerial cable or an underground connection to the home or the business. With that now removed, you suddenly open up a whole new marketplace that drops costs for everyone. And as our broadband and digital inclusion strategy has approached with that hybrid approach with shifting the marketplace and that tipping point, we are now at the precipice of that tipping point to increase through market forces and through our digital inclusion efforts, enabled through the revenue generated through our market force programs.
So the short answer is
yes.
Smartphones count,
I
or
think-
only 5G?
Because
Because you can use this as a hotspot with 4G. Even.
Right. I think the question is speed and utility. Right. So if you have a feature phone, or if you've got a smartphone and you've got a data plan that you can't afford to use, you don't have broadband access. But if your preference is to use a phone to do your homework and you've got a fast enough speed to be able to do that, then effectively you have broadband. And this is some of the redefinition that we're doing. And I think we'll hear from one of the experts on how this is used in real life a little bit and an example of what that kind of higher speed connectivity could do. We think that connectivity is becoming more important than the form factor of the device that people choose to use. And as you know, you can't necessarily make a teenager do anything that they don't want to do.
Oh, I well know that.
Right. So one of our guiding strategies on the broadband strategy is choice. And choice doesn't mean that everybody's going to choose a laptop or everybody's going to choose a phone, but that they should have high speeds that allow them to do what they want to accomplish.
So of the 95,000 now, are we saying they don't have access to that? They don't own a smartphone. They don't have any internet access in their home. What's the 95,000 that we're talking about, that we're trying to get down that number?
So from a research perspective, the 95,000 is based on the 2016 American Community Surveys that asked the San Jose metro area if they had internet access at home or if they had a non-phone device at home. So it's the intersection of either they don't have internet access at home at all, or they don't have the appropriate device to allow them to achieve all the outcomes we were just talking about.
Okay.
And then more from a specific perspective, right now broadband is a term that is defined by the FCC as wired line, 25 megabits download and 3 megabits upload. And the interesting turn of events we find ourselves is our foremost authority on communications seems to be lagging behind technology and not willing to actually say broadband should be defined as faster than that, because even at 25 megabits per second in a household of multiple low-income families, only one student can stream their homework video. The second student won't be able to do that. Right. So I think what we're going to see is the definition of broadband. Maybe it's going to happen at a local level or a state level, led by cities like San Jose, are going to say, no, it should be 100 megabits per second up and down, and that's wired or wireless. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think we need to define it ourselves.
I think we're getting to the point based on what we're seeing from certain federal agencies.
Makes sense. I'd also like to just point out that not everybody's doing homework, and that the needs of a busy household with 2 teens or more are different than the needs of a senior household. And they're not going to be typing term papers. They're not going to be looking for jobs necessarily, but they do need to be connected. So for them, a phone might be fine because they can FaceTime, they can text, they can maintain connections with their community and their families and their friends. But the needs are different. And so I think we need to just keep that in mind, that it needs to be kind of a flexible definition, because we want to include everybody, but we want to be able to count properly when we're collecting our data about what connectivity means, because really it's not about broadband, it's about connectivity, right?
Correct. And how we're thinking about that approach is essentially a customer segmentation approach. And what we think of is, broadly, we've spoken in a broad brush about these 95,000. There are probably about 8 different types of segments within that. There's the recent immigrant family that's very low income. There's the kids in school who need to do their homework. There's the elderly folks who need to have access for staying connected in healthcare. And part of what we'll do as we get closer and closer to implementation is to break down those customer segments and prioritize those customer segments and realize what are the right interventions for each of those segments. Because getting a hand into and teaching a 13-year-old is completely different than teaching his 85-year-old first-generation American grandmother. And we need to recognize and value the needs and capabilities of those different segments. So that's the way we would sort of take your feedback, is to look at customer segments, do some prioritization of that, and also tailor the approaches to those customer segments.
Thank you. That makes perfect sense.
Thank you. Now we have Blair Beekman. Oh, yeah. Sharina, I think that you wanted to also comment as well.
Yes, thank you, Council Member. I just wanted to add to the comments from the team. As you might remember, Councilmember Davis, we actually did something that shows a lot of local leadership as compared with the national work here, which is we did a street surveys with low-income families on how they're using and accessing the internet. So we actually have the numbers around how many families with school-age children are using mobile devices versus landlines at home. What those survey findings showed was that still predominantly in low-income families who are mobile first, that they still use laptops to do their homework, and they're going to friends and relatives' houses to get intermittent access, so they really aren't using their mobile phone today to do their homework that much, and part of that is driven by the cost of service. So cost of service is the #1 barrier to digital inclusion, and families who are low-income don't have unlimited data plans. And so, I'll happily, recirculate that survey so you'll have that data, but it's really something unique that we have in San Jose. And so, as Kip mentioned, we are doing a more segmented approach, and we're talking to a lot of community organizations. So I think we're in a good position to find solid interventions. Thanks.
Great. All right. Moving on to item number D3, the Access East Side.
So, we talked earlier about this sort of chain from conception to strategy to implementation, or this just chain from idea to value. And so this, as we've talked abstractly about digital inclusion, we're going to talk concretely about what it means to apply digital inclusion in the real world around the customer case, in this case, of the high school student. And we're bringing up our leader and expert on this, Randy Phelps, who is our partner from Eastside Union High School District, is the CTO there, comes from a tech background and has been our collaborator and a longtime champion for this effort. So I won't steal any of his thunder, but I will allow us to begin to walk through the presentation. I think Dolan is going to take us there first, and then we'll have Randy up here available to add perspective and then take any questions that you have.
Great, yeah, thanks, Kip. Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, Councilmember Jones, council members, members of the public, and city staff. I'm Dolan Beckel, Director of Civic Innovation. It has been a while since we talked about the Eastside Union High School District community Wi-Fi. So today I'm going to provide a brief summary of the expected outcomes of the project to remind everyone, review the scope again. Kip and Jay had Venn diagrams. I have an actual presentation, which I know excites Councilmember Jones and other people, that we actually have video of what we're talking about doing actually in action that was put together by Randy's team on very short notice, and finally discuss next steps. So as a little bit of background, Eastside Union High School District in 2004 passed a technology bond to increase student access to computers and modern technology. East San Jose has the largest concentration of digitally excluded families, whether those are seniors or families with school children. And Randy and Chris Funk and the team and the board explored several options to leverage that bond to improve digital inclusion and help close the digital divide. And ultimately, they decided to partner with the city in 2016 to pilot what was then called the Community Wireless Network, which has now been rebranded as Access Eastside. As a reminder, the Access Eastside outcomes were to provide free internet access for all students, teachers, and the community, and that's important, and the community within the surrounding attendance areas of 3 high schools, those being James Lick, Overfelt, and Yerba Buena, that are within the lowest income areas of East San Jose. That's kind of the technology outcome. The true outcome is we want to advance student academic achievement through internet-based learning technologies and provide opportunities for students to connect to career, college, and other forms of resources online. To give you a little bit of a geographic and technology scope, this is a picture of the Eastside Union High School District with Overfelt, Yerba Buena, and James Lick. So the scope of the entire project for all 3 of those high school attendance areas was free outdoor Wi-Fi, both within the community and on campus. It included the free LTE hotspots provided by the Sprint 1MP project, which helped cover some quality and coverage gaps. There are 3 attendance areas across 51,000 students and additional access for teachers and administrators. That doesn't include about 75,000 homes across those 3 attendance areas. And it was and remains a very innovative partnership between a city and a school district in that the district funded the installation and initial maintenance. The district performed the administration of the user IDs and the password and the credentialization. The city managed the delivery of the Wi-Fi network and manage the permitting of devices on our poles, from which we all know we learned a lot. The city is providing the power for this. The city is providing the internet backhaul, and our partner SmartWave did the actual installation and is doing the maintenance of the network. It will be at scale, and it almost is now the largest known public sector intervention in digital inclusion using outdoor Wi-Fi technology. Then specific to the first pilot, which is the James Lick coverage area, James Lick went live actually on Halloween, so trick or treat. Unfortunately, it was a treat for students and teachers. We implemented almost 200 Wi-Fi access points, each one of those little grew, kind of reminds me of Marvin the Martian. Wi-Fi bubbles there are the Wi-Fi access points around the James Lick High School. A high degree of satisfaction from the district and its students and the teachers, and the district and the city are currently evaluating both the user and technical performance and identifying ways to measure the outcomes. Next, I think, which is the exciting part, Randy's team, on very short notice with pretty much a direction, go interview some people, put together the following testimonial, which gives you an idea of how well it's being used in the James Lick High School area for the students and teachers. So John, if you can shift click with volume. And while the internet, there we go.
My name's Rich, and I'm a junior. Before, I wasn't able to look at my assignments, like my homework, and I had a big issue with that.
I'm Natalie, and I'm in 10th grade. Trying to finish my homework, even though I didn't have a computer, or sometimes my phone didn't have the internet able to do it.
Now that I have it, it allows me to look at assignments that I have from other classes, and we use this thing called Flip for math. If we ever have an issue on a problem for math, we could just look at a video.
My name is Raquel Martinez, and I'm a 9th grader. I think it really has like a good impact because there are people that don't have smartphones or internet, and I feel like it just helps them out.
I am Dorothy Atkinson, and I am an integrated Math 2 and Math 3 teacher at James Lick. So far in the classroom, Community Wireless has been awesome because I actually started recording homework help videos, because a lot of students would say, I don't know how to do this, my parents don't know how to do this. They're able to go home, watch the videos, and get that homework help individually from me. And then they're more able to get the homework done. So the Community Wireless has actually been really great because the students have been able to message me through Remind late at night and say, hey, Miss A, my grade doesn't have this in it, but I thought I turned it in. And so I'm able to respond. And so the Community Wireless is able to give them access to apps and that technology, which helps their grade. From a teacher standpoint, I've definitely noticed a change in my classroom because I'm getting more students who are turning in homework, and I've had an improvement in actual questions because of those homework videos. So they're able to kind of reflect on what I'm saying in the homework videos at home, kind of process it, and come back and be able to ask me better questions.
Yeah, I would recommend it. It's really helpful, so I use it all the time.
Yeah, definitely, because some kids don't have access to phones or computers, and it would be good for them.
I think it's good because some kids don't really get to have this experience. So it's nice that you guys are giving it to us.
So I'm sure there'll be some questions of Randy, but while John's returning to the PowerPoint slide, just to quickly wrap this up, obviously this is, it takes a village. It looks very simple when you see a video of how the students are using it to better their math homework. Thanks. But there was a lot of individuals and organizations involved in this. The Cupertino Electric, Chris Funk and the board that made it all happen by approving it. PG&E that is involved in metering. Rosenden Electric, who was also an electrical contractor, a good place to be in the city these days as an electrician. The council and the mayor's office that back in April of 2016 approved the partnership and the partnership to leverage the district's funding and the city resources and city assets and city poles and power. That being the Department of Public Works and Transportation. This was one of our two kind of pioneering projects on attaching devices to poles, of which the city is now going to become a nationwide leader in that area. Information Technology, who leveraged our existing internet connection to provide both fiber and a microwave shot to the fire department to get the internet access to the school district, the library who's been working with us on educational outcomes, SmartWave who's our technology provider, and last but not least the students and teachers at James Lick that participated in the video and are getting the educational outcomes, and also the teachers are getting the workforce outcomes. So it definitely took a village to achieve that first pilot. So just some next steps. As I said in the beginning, it was critical, and we realized how critical back in April that this was being opened up to the public, which was the basis by which the school board approved that. So we are, as we speak, going to provide free wireless internet access to the public within the James Lick area, attendance area this fall, using a unique SSID. We have engaged a private sector Fuse Fellow to help us formulate the city's overall community wireless strategy. We know that our current wickedly fast Wi-Fi is reaching the end of its life in many ways, and we want to make sure that whatever we do around this incorporates the students in the schools, the business community for economic development, any possible Internet of Things leverage. So we're going to be developing a strategy and having a first look at that this fall. The school continues to evaluate the performance, and we will then be coming back to council with kind of a reevaluation of our wireless strategy, which includes our coverage areas, our technology options, and our financial installation and maintenance options next spring. And then certainly together with that, we'll be coming back with the school district on a recommendation on next steps for Yerba Buena and Overfeld. But what's key this year, the key focus this year is opening it up to the community so that the 25 households around the James Lick area that even may not have students in the school district, but have access to the coverage from those Wi-Fi can get basically free internet access for their workforce, educational, healthcare options. So with that, I'll turn it back to Chairman Jones.
Thank you, Dolan, and thank you for that presentation. I think you have me figured out now. Not that I don't like Venn diagrams, but I definitely like the interactive.
Videos are more exciting.
Exactly, exactly. So, Mayor?
Yeah, I didn't see any Venn diagrams there. Just waiting. It's not coming. Okay. Randy and Dolan, thank you for all this. This is really great work. Great to see. Do we know anything about the quality of the signal and the speed of the service?
Yeah, Ed Kim from the city and SmartWave provide us absolutely great metrics as far as all the information as far as throughput and how well it works. Our kids report that they can actually stream Netflix on it. Which is
it could be good or bad.
Which when you were defining broadband before, I was thinking, we usually say if something's as easy as Facebook, and if you can watch Netflix on it, it's suitable. And the report that we get from our kids, especially the ones that don't have anything, either they think it's more than adequate to do all the homework type things that they need to do, and they do quite a bit of YouTube and that stuff too.
And how are we assessing satisfaction?
Well, we canvassed the school, of course. We actually worked with the kids and the teachers at the school, and then with the principal, David Porter. And we're really blessed because David Porter is an absolutely outstanding principal who also lives in the neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. And so he is extremely good. He lets me know if anything's not quite working the way that we would like, and each time we've addressed it without any difficulty.
Okay, I'm just wondering, is there some tool? I just want to be sure that, I know these things always can get a little creaky at times, and there's always a challenge one way or another. Are we actually doing a survey where we're asking people the question and they're giving us, we have objective data, that kind of thing?
We have, it's interesting, anecdote plus anecdote plus anecdote doesn't really equal data, at least in our experience, because people say one thing, and when we survey people to death in education, I don't know if we're constantly doing that, and the data we look at as far as getting it to where we really believe that it's accurate is difficult. What I would say is, first, we have surveyed our community, and they have reported that it works more than adequately.
So again, is there data that we could look at just so we know?
Sure.
Okay, that would be helpful, because I know we're both investing in more in expansion, and we just want to understand what's the satisfaction rate. More than the anecdote about Netflix, I really want to know, are we out there measuring it? Is it 50 Mbps? You know, what's the
So
measurement?
the good thing is we can get you the data, you have the data today.
Okay,
Which
great.
is how many connections are being made, how long people are on, how many unique IDs. In other words, you can see the actual devices coming on, how long they stay, how much they do. That's the best possible indicator. To me, I mean, is someone on a machine and
except-
actually doing something?
Yeah, but actually being able to measure the speed would be helpful, and actually hearing, you know, some survey from a user who says, yes, it satisfies my need. That's what I'm most interested in. I know we can discern a lot of different things or infer different things from the fact that someone's on for a long duration. Maybe that, you know, they gave up and they went, you know, and made dinner and came back. I just don't know. And so it would just be helpful to have some objective data to understand, okay, it's working, great, now we can move on, kind of thing.
Yeah, so we can come back with some of the technical data
That'd be great.
that we already have available, and then as we open it up to the community, one of the things that we are already including is a survey as we open it up to the community to get the community side of the story as well.
Okay.
And that's that side of it, the city has a little more control over design and content, so we're going to be implementing a survey, and we'll get the technical data, then we'll work with Principal Porter from the district.
Super helpful, because Randy, I'm sure you guys are doing great work. It's just that, you know, we're making decisions about where to spend the marginal dollars as you guys are, right? And we just want to know, okay, is it meeting the standard or not? And we've had, you know, frankly, a bad experience, I think, with Wi-Fi in downtown. And, you know, I'd heard plenty of anecdotes about how great it was going to be and how great it was. And then you just have a very different reality months later when people are actually giving you feedback. And so
I think one advantage we had was maybe from your experience, which was when we worked with our folks, we set expectations.
Mm-hmm.
So we described the product accurately to them before they got it. And because it's performed the way we described it, people have been happy. The actual performance, the throughput, those kinds of things, those are hard numbers. They're easy to see.
Yep.
But the affective part about how people feel about the access has not awful lot to how you create the context. In our case, we created context for our users so that they would understand what the experience would be like. They'd know it was free and it was for these purposes.
Yep.
If they used it for other things, they used it for other things, and I think that's really helped in terms, and I think that'll be reflected in the survey results.
Okay, that would be really helpful to see, because I agree both are important. We want to understand how it's performing technically, but then we also want the survey data. People say from a scale, you know, 1 to 5, is this working for you? You know, that would be super helpful. And then at some point I know this would take an awful lot of study, and I don't expect you guys to have done all this, but is there any kind of sample group where you're looking at student performance before and after they got connected to see, is this improving academic performance in any way?
Well, any research in the education side of things is what's called descriptive research.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the consequence of that is, I'll give you an example. In a previous life, I worked on a project where we provided a laptop to every student in the state of Maine when Angus King was the governor there. And that project was a fantastic project. It did some revolutionary things for the state of Maine. When we had an outside group that was outside of our company and outside the state of Maine to study it, they said that the laptops absolutely had an impact on student performance. However, in the interpretation of things, it was like global warming. Suddenly it was like a 50-50 thing. You follow what I'm saying? So
Well, the good news is there is objective data out there, and you guys are doing it
There
every
is,
day
and
when
if
you're
you look at-
assessing student performance, and that's all. We just want to be able to understand, as you look at that data, are you seeing, for any sample group, can we see it improving or not? Because again, we have to constantly go out there and justify to our residents, this is worth investing in.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying it's not worth it. I believe it is, but I can't just say it. I need to know.
we can absolutely provide the scores for the kids who have had access to the system over the past year since October 31st of
Okay.
17.
Yeah, it'd be really helpful, Randy. I know that we've been working hard with your district and with others around creating a data trust that'll enable us to be able to get aggregate data without obviously violating any privacy issues of the child. And it's precisely for interventions like this, whether it's the Mayor's Gang Prevention Task Force work or, you know, after school education work or digital literacy, we want to know, are we moving the needle with this investment or not? Because there are lots of ways to invest in kids, and we want to make sure with scarce dollars we're making those right investments. So thank you very much, Randy. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Camus.
I think the mayor took a little bit of what I wanted to say. I would love to see measurements before and after for grades, because one of the reasons we are paying for this, and there was no cost affiliated with this. I don't know. I know we authorized payments to create this program. I just forgot how much it was.
Yeah, I mean, so I think just to clarify this, the city's investment was the city's investment was largely around the power and providing access to the polls. So the district's 2014 technology bond measure, I was it?
We paid for it.
You did?
They
Okay.
paid
I
for
thought
it.
we in our budget we put in something like $250,000. I thought.
Yeah, it passed through our budget because we needed to use it to authorize and fund the vendors, but that was all coming from the school district.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's how it worked. Okay.
Yeah, pretty amazing.
So I misunderstood before. But I do want to get back to, like, the bottom line is we want to see these kids succeed, and that's the whole point of this whole exercise. To me, I want to make sure that that children in the East Side have the ability to do their homework, as was in the video, and that would be a good measurement for us. So as far as what you should be measuring, or what we expect to be measured, is here's what happened last year before this broadband was in existence, and here's the grade, average grade or average API or whatever it is that the schools measure these days. I know that my kids have this CAPI or something like that, California Performance Evaluation. It'd be good to see if grades rise on the average during that. And I know it's not that won't be the end all of measurements, but and I'd love to see, like, that maybe the grades, the average grade that they were given, because they could do their homework, obviously. That's what I would love to see. And also, I'd love to see, I know this is probably easy to get this kind of information, is how many people actually used it. I know that you can get identifiable pings or whatever on how many people use it.
We know specifically who logged in.
Oh.
Our identity management system, so when Johnny logs in, he logs in as Johnny. We know how long Johnny's there.
Oh, cool.
We can see we have a great deal of granularity toward that. So
yeah, it would be good to see how many people are using it. And I don't want to know if Johnny himself is using it. I just like to get, like, how many Johnnies are using it. So general information. I don't necessarily need, he went on the library's website, and that's not the kind of information I'm looking for. I'm liking to see, like, 1,500 students used it for up to an average of 20 hours per week or something like that. That's the kind of info that I'd like to see. And congratulations on getting this up and running.
Well, it's been a great partnership with San Jose's team, with the mayor, and all of you for supporting it. And like I said, for us, it's been a great thing for our kids. One of our major initiatives in our district is around equity and providing opportunity for people. And the people who couldn't be on, and we were able to address them district-wide with a different program over the last year. For us, it's allowed us to provide every student that wanted it an opportunity to be on, and the chance and the opening and the taste of equity where they have what the other kids have. And we see that as just a huge, huge, huge win for our students, because they feel better about things and they are more excited. The initial data that we looked at that was intriguing to us, that we'd like to say has to do with this, was that attendance was impacted at James Lick. Now, you have teenagers, so there's a million different influencers in their life. So ascribing it to just one thing and saying that's what's different is kind of, it's a stretch. But I realize for public purposes, you absolutely have to make the stretch once in a while in order to make the case. But we've seen that already, and we see that our kids who walk around with the phones on the grant that Shireen and I worked on, those kids have a different level of confidence. They didn't have a phone before, and they didn't have a smartphone and a data plan, and they walk down the street a little differently than they did before. And that was one of our major goals, is The kids walk through the world feeling as though they have a shot, and that's what this program provides for them.
Great. Well, again, fantastic, and I'm looking forward to getting further updates.
And in the interest of partnership, we didn't make it easy on the district to do some initial evaluation because we delivered late. We were learning a lot about our polls, and so we were significantly behind schedule. We did not make the beginning of the schedule of the school year, and as some of you know, you need a certain amount of time. And so we did not make it easy because we delivered late and then summer hit. And so now we'll be in a better position to have a longer runway. I do think it was encouraging that the number of credentials that popped on the first month was like, I think we had 9,000 new credentials, which a credential is a user ID and a device, right? So if you have, Randy can talk about that more.
1,200 students.
Yeah.
There's 1,200 students at the school, and you figure maybe 120 other staff, maybe 140. But you had 9,000 unique logins with real identities from our organization. So even kids from other schools were going over into the James Lake neighborhood and using the wireless, which is really cool. Because there are some neat public spaces there, and if you had a chance, a little ad here, if you ever had a chance to walk the James Lake campus recently, home of Jim Plunkett, Heisman Trophy winner, it is absolutely a gorgeous campus now. The work that's been done there in the last 6 or 7 years is just absolutely phenomenal, and that place has become a show place. It's a new tech high, and all the numbers for that school have been going up for several years, and so the numbers that we see in terms of accessing it, we know people from around the district are going over there and getting on and using it, which is great.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you again. Thank you, and great progress. Thank you.
Thank you. And just one clarification, Jim Plunkett, Super Bowl winner for the Raiders. Just wanted to get that in there.
He won the Heisman too.
He
got both.
But I
Yeah,
wanted to get
it was good.
the more prominent recognition. Councilmember Depp?
Also, just all adults going on high school campuses should stop by the main office. Just on that point, in terms of data, I don't know if we can actually get kids' grades, because we shouldn't be able to because of privacy concerns. But maybe I used to take something called the STAR exam. I don't know if it's called that anymore, but some sort of standardized testing that would be helpful, just kind of anecdotally. But this discussion kind of made me think, is this a closed network that we're allowing them, or is it just open access to the full internet?
So there's two dimensions. There's the school dimension, which is highly restricted and secured, and then there's going to be this fall the public free Wi-Fi dimension that will be unsecured and open to the public in the same way that our wickedly fast Wi-Fi is.
I see. So, the student. Oh, go ahead.
And which will have a privacy policy around it. I just want to kind of hit that off because that was a question I saw coming. We'd have around who has access to the data and how that data is used.
Sure. I guess I'm not for necessarily an intranet or censorship per se, but I think for all the great things you can do with internet, there's also a kind of a dark side to the internet. And if there's an opportunity to somehow set up a study or somehow with cyberbullying or something where kids get on a forum and they talk smack about each other, and I don't know. If they don't have access to that, they don't have access to homework and all the positive of the internet, but they're also living perhaps like I did without the internet, which, playing outside more and making their own adventures out of whatever. But now that they have the internet, of course, they're going to be drawn to all the good stuff, but there's going to be all the negative as well. So to the extent that we are providing that bridge, maybe there's an opportunity to somehow glean some information about how that works. Just thinking out loud.
Yeah, there definitely is the opportunity to do that. And I think one overarching clarification is there's a federal law called the Child Information Protection Act, SEPA, which all the devices that access the Access eSide, the district's network, have to be SEPA compliant, and there is filtering and management of access to certain social media sites and certain actions and things like that. So one thing I did want to clarify is that for those students who have a student credential, a user ID and password that they log into, they do have restrictions on what they can do and what they can see and where they can go as defined by the SEPA rules at the federal level.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. Dolan, that kind of triggers another question. So what about like multiplayer video games? Would that, are we talking about when we measure scores, are we measuring player scores, or are we measuring academic scores?
I would have to ask Randy whether or not, Xbox Live remote can operate over the Access eSite network. I think his answer is going to be no. Certainly, the community portion of it is open, but I think it's key to recognize the district and the city took a risk because there are other ways to provide internet access to low-income families. And this was done under the promise that both the students and the parents and the teachers and the community of non-students would have access to this. So that is what the promise was made to the district, to the board, and so it is an interesting, unique situation where you have a platform that's providing both very secure internet access to children and providing open internet access to the community. And that's why we're taking our time to make sure we deploy this correctly in compliance with all privacy rules and making sure that it's not jeopardizing the security of the children when we're opening it up to the community portion.
Great, thank you. So no other further questions from my colleagues. We have a speaker on this item, Blair. Did you want to speak? Yes, no? Come on up.
Hello. I tried to practice a certain stateliness in arriving this time. Thank you for this issue. I felt I should start with a question here in the beginning, and you don't have to answer it, but just a question for you to think about. What do you think of the idea, just to totally, in my innocence and guesswork and how to work with city government, the idea of with this new project for the East Side School District, and you talked about investors, why not introduce investors to the idea of the ordinance process that I'm talking about, that you are building and that the County of Santa Clara has already built and started upon? What do you think the reaction of investors would be? Do you think they would freak out? Do you think they would be interested and intrigued at this chance to connect different parts of government with our school system and to teach our children what is good civics and what is good government and what's good business practices as well? And, it's like, and good technology practices. So it's like, it could be a cornucopia of just a bunch of choices for students to understand. And I hope that can be of interest to you, and I hope that's not frightening to you, because I feel that you're still very frightened here in San Jose, and I'm just trying to offer this as ways so you can relax and feel open and to work with stuff. Thank you.
Hey, Blair? You can go, we're going to roll into open forum, so go ahead and do your open forum right now. Okay. Get mentally into the game. And
yeah, I wanted to give it the space to resonate.
Yeah, there you go. Well, go for it.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I wanted my words to resonate there a bit, so thank you. Okay, so for open forum, to mention your first item again about the graphic, about the dashboard, it was mentioned the police dashboard. we've had some serious problems with the IPA, and thank you for your help and work and all of that. There was a serious police dashboard problems with statistics and how to read statistics and talk about statistics. And I felt he wanted to do a good thing in the end. And all of a sudden the board came up with the council came up with some interesting ideas that were innovative and that were new in how to talk about statistics. I hope that can be drawn out and brought out in the future and made safe and secure to discuss and make it a process that I think could be innovative and pleasing to all sides. It takes work and effort, and I hope you can make that effort to bring that out. And it can be a new truthfulness for all of us to understand how to read statistics for the police dashboard in the future and stuff like that. And my other comment was, I'm really worried about the LED program, and that this is what the bond money is talking about apparently a lot. How is this relating to the basic question I have of myself? I don't quite know if I'm correct, but that you need the bond measure this fall to pay for the Civic Innovation Department of itself that has supposedly gone way over budget. And what's the discrepancy there? Where is actually the bond money going, will be going? I hope you can make that clear to me in the coming weeks and months. And I'm worried about the LED program. And but thank you for the work on it and that you're trying to make it open. I understand those techniques, and I'll talk about that more at another time. Thank you.
All right, Blair, we'll let that one marinate. And I have a question from my colleague, Councilmember Davis, and then I have a card from Richard Wong, who will be able to speak after.
A little bit delayed in my thinking, but to the point of providing the free wireless to the public, won't the kids just go on the free Wi-Fi because it'll be easier than having to sign in?
Within the school districts, so good question. And I wish Randy had been able to stay here. He could probably address this more eloquently. But within the students will need to log in to the school district's secured part of this Access eSide, because that's the only place where they'll get their assignments. And that's the only place where they'll be able to use the apps to get their assignments. So the apps to get their assignments, the apps to communicate with their school teacher, the apps to download videos will only be accessible through that secured user ID and login that the students have for that Access eSide portion. So I think you're correct in saying they can use either one when it comes to the academic work and the academic achievements and the academic applications. Those will only be available to them with their user ID and password logging on from home. Does that make sense?
Yes. So right now they can use, they can log in, but they can they only use those academic apps, or they can use an expanded, most of the internet?
This is what I need to ask Randy to clarify what SEPA allows them to access and not access. I do know we have discussed the converse of that, which is the school district apps are not available just on a free public Wi-Fi, generally speaking, right?
So we actually get, I'm trying to think forward to the data and how you're tracking it, and Kip's nodding his head, he knows where I'm going with this. So it sounds like when the free Wi-Fi is available, we're actually better able to track how much time they're spending on academic stuff, because they'll just use the free Wi-Fi for their other tasks, and they'll log in only when they need to log in for academic purposes. Maybe, or probably. Because it's a barrier, right? It's one more step to have to log in. So if you can bypass that with the free Wi-Fi, you'll just bypass it unless you need it.
The short answer is yes. In some respects, it is going to complicate some things, because the publicly available Googling for a homework assignment they may choose to do on the free public Wi-Fi side of it. So I think that's a valid point that will complicate some of the data collection, and we'll have to look at that.
So I don't like the idea of withholding access, but if you're trying to prove the program, you may not want to do the free public Wi-Fi until you've had a whole academic school year on just this, you have to sign in using the unique login.
Yeah, this is some of the debate that we've been having internally is and again, echoing your comments earlier and some of the comments from the mayor and Councilmember Camus and others, is how do we measure and how do we best measure? And we don't have the capacity to do a PhD project, so I do want to kind of pull down the level of expectations, but in any use of the data, the cleaner the set of the data that you're using, as you very well know, is important. And so this is one of the debates we're having around timing, is how much does it impair our ability to answer the other questions that we want around school performance, and how does that mix? And again, just to get even farther into the weeds, do we want to give ourselves the ability, and then clearly let them know, to track students on either side of that? Because once you have a device, you have a MAC, you have a unique identifiable device, and if it's a school issue one, we could say we can watch it whether it's on the internal Wi-Fi or the external, and then but those are all the kind of debates we want to have around privacy, data, public use, and that's why it's slowed, is because we haven't answered all of these to at least our satisfaction yet. But that's one of the questions.
And it also muddies the comparison group, right? So the kids
Exactly.
who don't get the school device for whatever reason or choose not to
Suddenly
when the
have
free-
access because
right, then they'll have access. So I don't think it's a PhD level project, but I can definitely get you some master's students from Stanford to actually look at the data when you're ready to do that.
That would be a helpful connection. Thank you.
Happy to.
And I think just the other clarification is, due to the pace we are moving, we will have had a full academic year to evaluate, because students' user IDs and passwords don't change as they go through the high school. So we'll have basically half of one year and half of another year. So we'll have at least a full elapsed non-contiguous school year.
Yeah, it's just tough when the testing happens, right?
Right.
So determining what the test dates were for the school versus when they started getting access, because you want to choose as clean a I'm getting nerdy, guys, sorry, but
Yeah. Well, if I can double down on the nerdness, I think one of the questions I would ask is that I think that probably what we're going to be able to see at this level is a higher correlation around things like homework and some participation grades, and that will point to academic achievements. Because I suspect the overall academic achievements have so many other variables pointing to it that it's going to be difficult to disentangle that with this sample size.
Yeah.
But I do think we could see proxies that say, look, they're turning in homework more, their grades on the homework are better. And so, again, at the risk of just getting way into the research weeds, part of why we have slowed down is we don't really have that framed out and that protocol and that methodology in a way that we feel can answer that. So clearly, based on this feedback, I would say we need to do a couple of things. One, we need to take the time to sort of decide what our research question is, frame that out, and what our research methodology is, understand how that's going to impact the subjects, make sure that we have a way of getting that funded or staffed, and then come back to you with what we can and can't do around those measures, and use that to inform when and how we open the community Wi-Fi.
I think that makes the most sense. It's a pilot, and your pilot design should be informed by your research questions.
Correct. And part of what we did is we were such a hurry to get started with the implementation that we actually didn't have a research pilot design before we got started. And so we're catching up with ourselves in a couple of ways on this. And we also have to make sure that what we're doing is in collaboration with the school district. So we're sometimes a little more eager to measure things. They're sometimes a little more focused on getting the kids into school and making sure it operates. And so, as you see, it's a partnership.
Sure. Thanks.
Yeah. No, it's very impressed. I was waiting for you to whip out a linear regression on that one. Anyway, thank you, gentlemen. We have one more speaker, Richard Wong.
Good afternoon, distinguished panel, committee. My name is Richard Wong. I'm one of the community leaders here in San Jose, but I'm here today to represent USGEC, which is US-China Green Energy Council. And as a matter of fact, USGEC celebrated our 10 years anniversary in the Bay Area just last month. on energy. And we have so much going on with smart city that would want to see how we could benefit some of our endeavor with the city of San Jose. As regarding to the work plan, I would like to put a suggestion or suggestions to see how we could, all of us can holistically re-examine the advancement and our next step as to how we could move this so-called smart city improvement program forward. And the recommendation, the ideas is basically to really sit back and think a little bit about how we can go back and look at what we have learned so far. And one of the areas that me and my group are very concerned with is primary community engagement. And there are so many programs that we've been talking about it throughout the years that does not materialize because our focus has really been with well, maybe the dollar sign, which I'm not that good of a businessman, but I think that is our concern. Now, the other reason why we should back off a little bit and really holistically think about what smart cities is all about, and for all of us to really understand what we are talking about is to understand the technology itself, because it progresses so quickly,
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Right. So, yes, would be...
Time's up. Time's up. But thank you.
You are.
All right. All right. Thank you, gentlemen, and this meeting is adjourned.